talk about 420 itself, because some folks in the country say that, well, it's legal now and it's widely socially accepted. So is this just an excuse to have a big party, or is there still a protest element to the day?
I'm calling it a protestival because there are some things to celebrate, namely the legalization. But as you mentioned, in many ways we are worse off. So, for example, I do a lot of landlord-tenant law, and I have people come to me with notices from their condo saying, we have banned cannabis consumption and growing. And some of these individuals are medical patients who may have been engaging these behaviors for years and are now in a situation of, do I release some of my privacy? Do I have to comply with these new rules? Where do I stand?
So then, if in many ways the law as it's been rolled out is not necessarily clear, that condo example is very poignant to cities like Toronto and Montreal, some of the bigger municipalities. Who do you put the responsibility on? Was this the federal government not thinking this through?
I mean, I think that there are federal and provincial elements to the entire unfolding of cannabis. And if we look at the Act itself, the distinction between licit and illicit cannabis seems somewhat arbitrary. And I think that the problems start sort of at the federal level, and the provincial rollout hasn't been perfect either.
Now, initially, I mentioned that it's pretty widely accepted. People have accepted marijuana as part of mainstream culture. But is from your experience, is that in fact true, or is there still a social taboo to using it?
I think there's still some stigma, and it also depends on who the consumer is, in my experience. So we're not 100% there where it's okay to admit being a consumer at work and that doesn't have repercussions, or certainly in travel as well. So there's still work to be done.
So is that a legal issue, or is that a matter of, well, in time people will accept it?
I do think that it's more of a cultural, social thing, and especially as we start to see baby boomers sort of engage more with the market, I think that the attitudes will shift.
So if you were in a position to recommend to the federal government or the provincial government how things should move forward, because now the law is in place and it's rolled out the way it's rolled out, where are there rooms for improvement and adjustments?
So if I had a magic wand, there's a couple of things I would change. Again, that distinction between licit and illicit cannabis. Some of the penalties we see in the Cannabis Act are actually higher than what previously existed. So I want the regime to be closer to a regulatory fines rather than prison. I think that privatization of dispensaries, I think that's something we need to work towards. Right now there are a set number of licenses for the province, and individuals who may have years of experience with the plant are being shut out from the legal market. So if we really want to tackle the underground market, we need to work on transitioning them into the legal regime.
So you've mentioned that we should be moving towards the privatization. Why is that?
I think that there is enough sun to shine on everyone. This is a crop with a huge amount of potential. And what I'm seeing right now is a system that isn't merit-based, and people who have really been the ones on the front line fighting for legalization are being shut out of the market. Meanwhile, the individuals drafting the rules and those who are first in line to profit are occasionally police officers, politicians, individuals who made their career enforcing prohibition. That's not fair.
Who are you referencing when you say this?
I mean, the head of the task force was Bill Blair, and it goes down from there. There's a number of individuals with links to political parties or, like I say, police enforcement, and to be first in line profiting, I think, is a bit hypocritical.
Just for folks at home to know the context of this, Bill Blair, who is now a federal minister, and as Karima mentioned, head of this, from the federal perspective, was the chief of the Toronto Police and was naturally responsible for cracking down on marijuana usage. So this is an issue that's come up quite a bit in the last couple of years, and he's defended his position. He said the law has changed, perspectives have changed, and so have I. So as we move forward for this pro festival, I believe you called it, so it's a protest, but it's also a celebration. And if 420 is not necessarily centered around marijuana necessarily, could this day be used to propel the legalization of other substances? Is that what you are hoping?
I think that that's maybe the natural sort of extension of this activism. And we know right now that at the provincial level, funding for overdose prevention sites has been removed. And so, you know, there's still a fight to be fought.
What about folks because I do want to bring in this perspective, folks who feel like, look, these are drugs. They can be very damaging to your body, especially things that are being smoked. They're secondhand smoke. It affects my space, and also sometimes they're lethal. People overdose routinely, and in this country, the opioid crisis is a massive one. Are we, for some people, heading in the wrong direction?
I understand those concerns, but I would encourage people to really look at the evidence and how do we deal with a drug as a social problem. If we're talking criminal law, that's a very blunt force instrument, and it doesn't fix the underlying situation. So we should treat addiction like a health crisis, because that's what it is.
Okay, Karima, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and insights.
Thank you for having me.